Hey there and welcome back. Dre Redfern here. And in this month's edition, we are on location at the How to Manage office for the How to Manage in Daniels Head monthly webinar. So we're going to be covering a variety of topics today on the 7 pillars of a small law firm and really taking things to the next level for you in your practice. And excited to do it here on location at the How to Manage offices. So Arjun, excited to be with you, man.
Happy to have you.
So diving into it, let's frame it from the top of what are the 7 pillars of a successful practice, and then sort of reverse engineering that we go one by one, start to finish, sort of like, crescendo at the end.
Right. So let me preface this by saying these are the 7 main parts of every successful law firm that I have observed. This is not a prescription. This is not my edict. I'm not telling you this is how it has to be. I'm telling you that after working with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, into the tens of thousands of small law firms, this is what I have observed. I'm reporting to you what I see. If you don't like it, complain to reality. Don't complain to me, okay? This is just, I'm a reporter here, okay? Sure. I've worked with literally more than 10,000 small law firms, and law firms are very simple businesses, and that triggers some lawyers when they hear that, because a lot of lawyers feel overwhelmed, a lot of lawyers feel confused, a lot of lawyers feel like there's like so much going on, and they're like, it's so complicated. It's really not. It's kind of like when you pull your laundry out of the dryer and all the socks are there, and you start sort of separating the dark socks from the light socks, and the dress socks from the sports socks, and the high socks from the low socks. And pretty soon, it starts to make some sense, right? But there's a lot of lawyers who I fully appreciate are going to be triggered by the notion that law firms are actually very, very, very simple businesses to run. Compared to almost any other kind of business you can imagine, a law firm is a relatively simple business to run. There's only 7 main parts of every successful law firm, and they're the same 7 main parts of every struggling law firm. Marketing, which is everything that is done to bring the right kind of prospective clients to the right place at the right time in the right frame of mind in the right quantity, which leads to sales, which is everything that's done to convert the prospective client from being a prospective client into a paying client. There's production, which is actually the work itself. Maybe it's being done in a systematic, organized, efficient, predictable way, or maybe it's being done like a fire drill every single time. But that's the 3rd main part, is the production. The people, receptionist, secretary, paralegal, associate, rainmaker, manager, junior associate, senior associate, owner, the people, right? And it's important to make sure you define the role by the skills required to do the job, not by the credentials of the person who's actually doing the job. Physical plant, here we are. We have way more physical plant here than we need. Post-pandemic, this office is mostly empty. We have 125 or 150 full-time employees. Only 20 people work here now. 13,000 square feet of mostly empty physical plant. And financial controls, budget variance report, cash flow projections, AR, cash position, work in progress, and then your goals, right? And the whole business is supposed to be working in service of you and your goals, your financial goals, your personal goals, and your professional goals. So, that's it. Those are the 7 main parts. There's levers, there's dials, there's switches, there's buttons. I've run out of analogies, but there's just so many things you can do to make a law firm work better. And it's either going to be in the area of marketing, sales, production, people, physical plan, financial controls, or you and your goals. 7 main parts.
So let's sort of break them down during our time together. Going from the top, we've talked a little bit about marketing previously in some of the older episodes. So if we were to say, like, bell curve it, there's obviously going to be outliers on either side. What would be the key elements of marketing that you would say, if someone hadn't watched any of our previous stuff together, that you would say, make sure you cover these one, three, five things when it comes to thinking about marketing or actually marketing your practice?
Right. So first big mistake that I see lots of struggling lawyers make. And it's so frustrating because you see a lawyer who's, she's just as good as a lawyer as the other one. He's just as good of a lawyer as the other one. They're willing to work just as hard, they care just as much about their clients, and they just struggle because they don't bring in the right clients. And people think that they aren't bringing in enough clients, but usually the problem is not that they're not bringing in enough clients. The problem is they're bringing in the wrong clients. And because of bringing in the wrong clients, they end up starving the business of cash flow and profitability. And the whole thing just sort of cascades into all these other problems and shows up looking like I don't have enough business, but the problem is you got too much of the wrong business. So first thing, and I know this is like a cliche, and depending on when you're watching this, this may be the buzzword du jour, but I've been using this word for 20 years, so I'm just going to use it. It's figure out who your avatar is, and it doesn't have to be just one.
Yep.
Who is your firm set up to serve? And you can help anyone, but you can't help everyone. Like how to manage a small law firm. We manage, as of today, we manage over 650 small law firms all around the country. We are by a long shot the largest provider of management services, of outside fractional timeshare management services for small law firms in the country. We can probably help any small law firm. I can't even begin to imagine a practice area, a city, a state that we couldn't apply our methodology to and produce phenomenal results. We can help anyone. But you know what? We can't help everyone. We have a 6-month waiting list for some of our premium services. We can't help everyone. And so it's very important that you get clear on who you want to help, right? Who is your service built for? And it's very scary for someone who is struggling financially to say, my service is not meant for these kinds of people, right? And you don't have to disparage those people. You don't have to say that they're assholes. You don't have to say that they're terrible people. You don't have to say that they have bad cases. You could just say, you know what? This business is not built to serve this kind of person, and it's not built to solve this kind of problem because it's built specifically just for these kinds of people and just for these kinds of problems. Much better to run your business that way.
If you're clear about the clients that you're attracting and the clients that you're marketing, that should make the sales process then significantly easier, more streamlined.
You know where it shows up a lot? It shows up in staffing.
I believe as far as the fulfillment of it, as far as the staff and the training, as far as protocols.
Well, so for example, classic mistake, right? Classic mistake, and I don't know why lawyers all think this makes sense, right? They got a family law firm and a criminal defense firm. Just think about this for a minute. A family law firm and a criminal defense law firm. So let's suppose you are going through a divorce and you've got kids and you are going to go to meet your lawyer and you're sitting in the reception area waiting for your appointment, and you're sitting there next to another client and you strike up a conversation, and maybe you even have your kids with you because you're going through divorce with kids, right? And you strike up a conversation with the person sitting next to you while you're both waiting for the appointment with your attorney. Armed robbery, you say. Right? It's just the reception area that you set up for the criminal defense client is different than the reception area you set up for the family law client. The reception area set up for the family law client who doesn't have children is different from the reception area set up for the family law client who does have children. The estate planning client isn't interested in the same magazines as the, immigration client, right? But if you don't know who your avatar is, you don't know who you're setting up the reception area for. and then you don't know who you're recruiting staff for. Because the kind of receptionist who's going to have the kind of personality and the temperament and the belief system and the values, who's going to be gung-ho and excited about helping you protect people's rights against an oppressive, overly zealous police state, that person might not be the right person to, be showing the kind of empathy for a person who is, been run over by a truck and has a personal injury case, right? And so the avatar, who the client is for, it just affects every part of the business, from the marketing to the sales to the staffing to how you set up your policies and your systems and procedures, everything. And it's like, if you plant the wrong seed, you're going to get the wrong crop.
So if people are coming in via your marketing, what would be a couple of the high level elements then when it comes to sales? Because sales tends to get a bad rap. Sales is sleazy. They think of the used car salesman with the slick back hair and khakis, trying to, skate one on you. And that's not what sales is. Sales is service.
Sales is one of the most loving, generous, giving things you can do for another human being if you know how to do it the right way. Which, when I went to law school, they didn't offer any classes on sales. When I graduated from law school, they didn't offer any CLE courses on sales. Sales is like a verboten term and word and concept. And then you go to most lawyers who graduate from law school who wind up going to work for a big law firm. The owners of that law firm don't want their associates to master sales, right? Because he or she who controls the clients rules the firm, right? And if I want to keep you
boxed in,
I was going to say in bondage. Yeah. You're right. If I want to keep you working for my firm, I don't want you to know how to go out and generate your own business, because if you know how to generate your own business, then why do you have to work for me anymore, right? The rest of running a law firm the rest of starting up and running a law firm is very simple. I mean, back in the mid to late 90s when I started in 1999 in the world of law firm management. Back then, to start a law firm, you needed a physical space. There was no virtual law firms in 1999. You needed a T1 line, which was expensive. You needed a server. You needed a room for the server. The server was a big box. You needed a lot of equipment. It took a lot of capital to start a law firm back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the late 90s, early 2000s. Nowadays, anyone with a laptop and a Zoom connection could start a law firm, right? And so the managing partners of the big law firms are scared, right? They don't want their associates to know how to sell legal services, so they make it seem like the dark arts, and it's not. It's very simple. It's very professional. It's very ethical. It's really fun once you learn how to do it.
So what makes an attorney successful at sales then, if it's not the dark arts?
Well, obviously, my preferred answer is, they've taken classes from How to Manage a Small Law Firm on how to sell legal services, which we offer lots of courses and workshops and programs. But really, sales is a skill you can learn, right? But even if you don't have the skill, you can still be really effective selling legal services if you genuinely give a shit about the client, right? Make it about the client. Take your ego out of the equation. Get clear on what you're selling, which is a huge mistake most lawyers make. They don't even know what they're selling. You talk to a family law attorney, what are you selling? They say family law services. You talk to an immigration lawyer, what are you selling? Immigration services. You talk to a bankruptcy lawyer, bankruptcy services. That's not what they're selling. They don't even know what they're selling.
Yeah.
So that's the first problem, right? They don't know what they're selling. They put their ego in the way, and they don't let it be about the other person. So your question to me is, what's the number one skill that a lawyer needs to sell legal services? The number one skill is empathy. Empathy and curiosity.
Why would those be the two most important skills?
Empathy, because the client isn't coming to you because of how great you are. They're not coming to you because as a tribute to your greatness, right? They're coming to you because they have a problem. And this problem is causing cascading problems in their life, right? This is the person who's scared, they're confused, they're overwhelmed, they're intimidated, or maybe they're frustrated because they've got such an enormously great, amazing opportunity, but they don't know what to do with it, and they're frustrated that they can't maximize. The point is, this person is having a human experience. They're having a human experience, an emotional human experience, and they're looking for relief, empathy, right? If you don't give a shit about the fact that the person sitting across the desk from you or in the other side of the Zoom from you is having a human experience, well, then you're going to do like most lawyers do who struggle with converting prospective clients into paying clients, which then leads to having problems with having uncooperative clients, which then leads to not getting enough referrals, which then leads to the client mistreating the lawyer's staff, which then leads to legal staff being, low morale and lots of turnover, right? If you go into the sales call and you don't care about the other person and what the other person is going through, well, then you're just going to go in there like, well, I went to this law school and I got the best grades and I've been practicing law for this many years and I'm the greatest lawyer and let me tell you more about myself and and let me show you my diplomas and let me show you my credentials and this law firm is this and this law firm is that. Meanwhile, the person on the other side of the desk, they just want a solution to make their life better, right? Empathy. No one brings you a problem laid out like a law school exam. It's a mystery wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in a riddle. I mean, that's the legal problem, right? They're coming to you and they say, I need a divorce. Do you really need a divorce? Or do you need a divorce so that you can live up to your fullest potential? Do you really need to live up to your fullest potential just to live up to your fullest potential? Or do you need to live up to your fullest potential so that you can be a better role model for your kids, right? Yep. So really, are you after a divorce or are you after being a better role model for your kids? I need to get my immigration status resolved in this country. Really? I mean, you just woke up and you had nothing better to do today. You had nothing better to do today. We could go to the movies. We could go to the beach. We could go to the park. I know what to do, honey. Let's go deal with our immigration. No, I mean, they're coming to the lawyer to solve a personal problem, right? There's something going on in this person's life that has bubbled this personal problem up to the top of their list of priorities and pressures and issues. And if you don't have curiosity to find out what's really going on, what's really driving this, I mean, you're just gonna miss what it's about, right? And then you're gonna have a hard time selling the service because you're gonna leave it up to the prospective new client to make the connection between this legal service and getting what they really want. But if you are curious and dig in and find out what they really want, I mean, it's the old thing, no one buys a shovel because they want a shovel.
They want a hole.
Do you want a hole? Or do you want to dig a swimming pool? Do you want a swimming pool? Or do you really want to have some activity you can do with your kids on a hot summer afternoon? Do you really want to have some activity you can do with your kids on a hot summer afternoon? Or do you really want to have a lifetime of memories with your children before they go off to college and aren't interested in hanging out with mom and dad by the pool in the backyard anymore? So really, what are we buying when we sell that shovel?
The emotion tied to the memories with your children.
For some people.
If we're asking questions going down that vein, yeah, but it could be 1,000 different things.
And you know what? The very next client who's coming in to buy that shovel might say, no. I'm here to increase the property value. I don't have any kids. I just want to increase the property value. The shovel equals increased property value. And the next prospective new person who comes in to buy the shovel is like, no, no, no. If you really get into it with them and create an environment of trust where they actually believe you give a shit about them, you'll find out that it's really about showing off to their neighbors. I have a pool and you don't. So 3 different clients. One's buying the shovel to have lasting memories with their children. The second's buying a shovel to increase the property value. And the third one wants to show off to the neighbors. And we could interview the next 900 clients that come in the door over the next 10 years, and every one of them is going to have a different answer. But if you're not curious, you're not going to find out, and then you're always going to have a mismatch in what you're offering and what they're really after. And not only will that make it harder for you to make the sale, your conversion rate will be lower. There's going to be more objection to price. And then when you start delivering higher property values to the person who really wants to show off to the neighbors, or you start delivering lasting memories for your kids to the person who wants higher property values, it's always going to end up the client always ends up being frustrated. And who they take it out on, they don't take it out on you, the lawyer. I know the lawyers think that the clients take it out on them. They take it out on your staff. Yep. And that's why you have low morale and turnover. So the avatar, it just has such a huge impact on every part of the business. It doesn't get nearly enough attention.
So let's move on to the third section, production. How do you differentiate sales from production, and what would be some of the high-level elements that attorneys should know about on the topic of production?
So production is just how the work gets done. Is the work getting done with a systematic, organized, consistent, predictable, intentional series of steps that have been thought through and analyzed and maybe tested and refined? Or is production being done because I just remember how to do it, right? So think about your favorite restaurant, right? Do you know who's in the kitchen every night when you go to your favorite restaurant?
No, not at all.
Let's talk about one of our favorite restaurants, Tarbell's in Phoenix, right?
Yep.
Love that place.
Yep.
He's not in the kitchen. Tarbell's not in the kitchen. He's out doing what he's doing, and he's got people in the kitchen, and like every time I go there, I get the same appetizer, that rock shrimp. I just can't get enough of that rock shrimp. I doubt very much that by pure chance, every single time that I go there, it's the same chef always there. They have different chefs. I know they've got turnover, right? And the chef takes the day off, they take the week off, and they go on vacation. But the reason why I know that I'm going to get the same product is because they follow a recipe, right? Now, there's other places that you go to that have a genius in the kitchen, and you walk in and you say, make me whatever you want. And they whip up whatever they want on the fly to their taste that day. And you better like it because you're never going to get it again, right? So processes are creating predictability. And that way the client knows what they can expect, yeah? And the problem is without predictable, consistent, deliverable, and work product, your marketing is basically just selling a pig in a poke, right? Come hire our firm. Maybe you'll have a good day, maybe you won't have a good day, right? When you go to the restaurant with a genius in the kitchen who just makes you whatever they feel like making, that's part of the fun, right? The stakes aren't high, and that's part of the fun. But that's not what people want when they hire a law firm. When they hire a law firm, what they want is consistency, predictability. They want to know they're going to get what they're going to get.
So what would be so we see a breakdown sometimes between, okay, this is what I sold them, and this goes back to, I think, the avatar element. This is what I sold them. This is what I have to actually fulfill as far as the deliverable on the production side of things. Are there elements around creating more structure, whether it's between sales or even just in the production process alone, that you say a solid, well-run law firm should meet these production systems or requirements or elements to help it run smoother as far as the fulfillment and the actual delivery of the product.
Right. So it's not as black and white as that. It's really a series of grayscales, right? To the degree that I can hire a dodo head off the street who knows nothing, sit them down, run them through a onboarding and training program with documented processes and systems and procedures, and they can crank out a reliable, predictable product that meets the standards that were promised in the marketing and the sale. I mean, that's the holy grail of a systematic, well-oiled machine.
Yep.
Yeah, that's McDonald's. Yeah, McDonald's takes teenagers, they run them through training, and all over the country, all around the world, anywhere you go to a McDonald's, you're going to get the same product, right? Now, a lot of people hear that analogy and they think, oh, well, that means low quality. No, Ruth Chris Steakhouse does the exact same thing, right? No matter what, there's like 300 Ruth Chris Steakhouses in the country, and whether you go to Ruth Chris in Miami or in Houston or in Los Angeles or in Chicago, no matter what Ruth Chris Steakhouse you go to, when you order the 8-ounce petite filet, you're getting the same thing. When you order the Caesar salad, it's always coming in that little jar thing, and it's always going to look the same and be presented the same, and it's going to take, right? So predictability, consistency, reliability is not the same thing as quality. You can have great quality, and it can be a one-off, or you can have great quality and it can be consistent and predictable. You can also have a one-off that's a shit show, or you can systematize chaos.
What would be if you were to look at it structurally with the law firms that you manage, where would be the starting place when it comes to production that you're going to start most of these law firms at? Say, hey, have you met this? Are you doing this? Or are you doing that? What would those elements be?
All right, so the very first thing that I'm going to do, and here's the thing, the very first thing that my team is going to do, right? Because I don't manage 650 law firms. I have a staff of amazing people. We've got 150 full-time, 125 or 150 full-time employees. We got 50 experienced law firm management advisors who use my playbook to produce a consistent, predictable, reliable experience. You follow what I'm saying?
Yep.
So the first thing they do is they do a diagnostic. There's 12 key internal policies, there's 12 key external policies, and there's 24 really important operational procedures. And so you figure we basically review those, right? As a starting point, you review these 12 key internal policies, 12 key external policies, 24 really important operational procedures. And for each of them, you give it a grade, a 0, a 1, or a 2. 0 is doesn't exist. 1 is it exists, but it's crap. 2 is it exists and it's good, right? And you can do a 3 also, which is it's really good. And the mistake that most lawyers make is they focus on taking their 1s and turning them to 2s, and they turn their 2s into 3s. Meanwhile, they got some 0s and they got some 1s, right? So get everything up to a 1, and then after everything's at least at a 1, then take the 1s to 2. Then once everything's at a 2, then you move everything from a 2 up to a 3. But don't be moving a 2 up to a 3, meanwhile you got a 0 over here where everything's falling down and going down the toilet. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
So to tell you which one to work on first, that's why there's a diagnostic, right? Because it's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all. The system is designed to help diagnose something specific for you. But I will tell you one thing to look for everyone, and that is the definition of the word emergency. The definition of the word emergency is a huge missed opportunity in most small law firms. The absence of a good working definition of the word emergency that everyone on the staff can agree on and that all the client can be taught, it creates so much chaos and so much lost revenue and so much more stress and anxiety than you can even imagine, just fixing this one simple little thing.
So are you saying that like actually defining emergency, or is it more a lot focusing on the idea of what is important versus urgent?
No, I mean, I'm being very literal. I mean, define what the word emergency means in your law firm, right? I'll give you an example. You say to your receptionist, you say to your assistant, you say to your whoever manages your schedule, you say to your clients, hey, there's two ways to get in touch with this attorney. There's two ways to schedule an appointment with this attorney. One is you can call and you can schedule an appointment. Or two, if it's an emergency, the attorney will drop whatever they're doing and they'll come to the rescue. Yeah?
Yep.
All right. Except no one knows what emergency is, right? So the client calls and says, I need to talk to my attorney right now. And the receptionist says, is this an emergency? And the client says, well, I don't know. To me, it's an emergency. And so the receptionist says, okay. And the receptionist puts the message through to, let's just say you, the attorney. And let's say you're out for dinner with your kids and you get a text or an email that the client has an emergency. And you say, hey, family, I'm really sorry. One of my clients has an emergency. And the family understands it's an emergency. You got to excuse yourself. You step out of the restaurant, you go to a quiet place, and you call the client, and they just have like a question about, I don't know, something that's not an emergency, right? Now you're pissed off. The client doesn't understand why you're so pissed off, and you go back and you bark at your receptionist or your assistant. How dare you do that? Blah 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 blah. Right? Okay, well now the next time the phone rings and another client calls and their life is burning down, right? They're in a high-speed pursuit with the police on their trail, and they're calling to say, it's an emergency, I'm gonna get arrested as soon as I run out of gas or catch a flat tire, get me, it's an emergency. And the receptionist, who remembers the last time that they put someone through who didn't really have an emergency and they got barked at by the attorney, who didn't bother to define what an emergency is. Okay, well, I'll schedule you for an appointment. Schedule me for an appointment? I'm about to go to jail. These are extreme examples, obviously, but if you can think of a less extreme example than this, these things are happening every day in law firms all across the country in every practice area, where clients are being frustrated and disappointed because they're not getting through when they have a legitimate emergency. Staff is under enormous stress because they're having to make judgment calls without any guidance as to what is or isn't an emergency. And attorneys are getting distracted and having their time wasted by things that aren't emergencies, and then they're getting even more embarrassed when they don't get reached when something is an emergency. And it's just creates so many problems. And now you have low star reviews on Google, and then you don't get referrals, and then the clients don't want to pay their bills. This one simple little thing, it just cascades all throughout the firm, and then you got bad Glassdoor reviews, and this firm sucks, they yell at me all the time, the clients are unreasonable, all because the attorney didn't empower the staff to know what the definition of an emergency is, and didn't educate the client to know what the definition of an emergency is, so that when the staff says, respectfully, sir, that's not an emergency. How dare you say that's not an emergency? Respectfully, sir, when you hired the firm, we agreed what the definition of an emergency is, and your ex bringing the kids home, missing a button on the shirt, doesn't qualify. I'm not going to schedule you for an emergency appointment with the attorney and pull the attorney out of whatever they're doing because there's a button missing from the kid's shirt.
Yep. Which I think is actually a good segue to the fourth part, which is people. So clearly that's a process that helps set your people up for success.
Yes.
So having some systems and processes, procedures, SOPs, in a practice to help it run more effectively, efficiently, get your team up to speed faster, easier training, easier onboarding, setting people up for more success so they can rise to the levels of their full capability or potential. What would be some of the elements around the people element in a practice that you want to weigh in on?
Wow. Okay. So we do entire workshops. We do entire 2 and 3 day workshops and entire 12-week crash courses around each of these topics. So I'm like trying to condense as much as I can into like a little snippet. People. So first off, understand there's a difference between employees, staff, and team. And be clear on the difference between employees, staff, and team. Because if you treat employees like a team, it works badly for you and badly for them. If you treat team like employees, you're missing out on huge opportunities. And I appreciate that it's in vogue nowadays to call everyone a member of the team, even if they're not a member of the team. But the term actually has a meaning, and misapplying it does a disservice to everyone involved. So that's the first thing I would say is be clear on who is an employee, who is staff, and who has graduated to become a member of the team, and treat them each accordingly.
You mentioned though that by treating staff as a team, that it sort of does you a disservice. Can you elaborate?
All right, so a team is a group of people who win together and lose together, right? And they share in the glory and they share in the misery of defeat. Maybe not equally, but they share. And it's unfair to ask someone to share in the misery of defeat if they don't have the power to effect what's happening. An employee is a person who shows up, they do a job the way the job has been defined within relatively narrow parameters, and they have a lot less discretion than a person who's on the team. But the other side is the employee has a lot less risk, right? Because as long as they do the job the way the job's supposed to get done, you pay them, they do their job, and if you have taught them to do the job the wrong way, if you have told them to do a job that's unproductive, if you have miscalculated the need for the job or the importance of the job and you end up losing money, you're still paying them because they did the job the way you asked them to do the job. The burden's on you to decide what job, why the job should be done, and how the job should be done, and then to train them how to do it. A team, hey, you know what? We have to agree together. We all get to have some input as to whether this should be done and how it should be done. And I'm not saying it's a democracy and everyone gets together around in a vote, right? But everyone gets to have some input, right? Because we know we're all gonna share in the glory, right? But we also know that we're all gonna share in the misery if we lose, right? So I have employees, and I have employees, and some of those employees have become a staff, right? And some of those staff have graduated and become part of my team. It's like you've got kids, right? How old are your kids?
13, 3, and 1.5.
All right. You don't have the same expectations of the 1-year-old that you do of the 3-year-old.
Not a chance.
And you don't have the same expectations of the 3-year-old as you do of the 13-year-old.
Correct.
And you don't have the same expectations of the 13-year-old as you do of the 1-year-old. And so you have to treat them each differently, right?
Yep.
You treat employees different than you treat staff. You treat staff different than you treat team. And you treat team different than you treat staff and employees. Now, an employee could also be part of the staff. They are part of the staff. And they are probably also an employee, right? So it's an additive, not a black and white either or.
Is there an element of this where there's maybe a small law firm, maybe they've got 2 or 3 people, that am I just categorizing my assistant is staff and the part-time person is
if you are sharing the wins and they are sharing the losses, they're probably on your team.
When you say
If you're not
sharing wins, though, what does that mean?
Profit share,
Okay.
as an example. I mean, that's the most obvious.
Yep.
Sharing the losses. Hey, you know what? All of us, our income is going down this quarter. Why? Because we made that mistake with that marketing vendor last quarter. We made that mistake with that bad hire last quarter. We made that mistake with that last initiative last year. And so this year is a down year. And so we're all going to share the pain. Well, we're a team. We all had a say. And you know what? We all had the potential. Had it worked, we'd all be here celebrating, right? We're a team. Employees, they don't get a vote. They don't get a say in how these decisions get made. And it's unfair to say to them, hey, last year we made some mistakes. My wife used to be the senior art director of VH1 for all of Central and South America. Viacom bought MySpace. Remember MySpace?
Yep.
Remember MySpace?
Tom.
MySpace, they bought MySpace, and then they basically shut it down. And Viacom lost lots and lots of money. And all the different companies that Viacom owned, the employees didn't get their bonuses that year. And my wife is like, fuck this. I hit all of my key performance indicators. My team that she built won like a whole bunch of international design awards that year. They got viewership to record levels for VH1 for Central and South America that year. And yet she gets dog shit for a bonus because some bonehead in Viacom corporate made the decision to buy MySpace. And like that's why people quit. I mean, that's a big part of the reason that she's like, screw this, I'm out of here, right? She didn't quit that day, but that was when she realized I'm not part of this team, but I'm being adversely affected by the decisions of the team that I have no input on.
I wanted to put in perspective for some people who have like, there's me and one person, or there's me and two people in the office.
Well, do those people win when you win? Do they lose when you lose? If they win when you win and they lose when you lose, then you're on your team. If they don't win when you win, if they don't lose when you lose, they're not on your team. If they only win when you win, but they don't lose when you lose, they're not on your team. If they only lose when you lose and they don't win when you win, they're not on your team and you're a jerk. I mean, but the question that I think that you're driving towards, which is the question that I suspect most of the solo small law firm owners who only have like one employee or maybe no employees, like, well, this isn't relevant to me. No. When you're wearing the hat of a receptionist, you're doing the job of a receptionist. So your law firm has a receptionist. It definitely has a receptionist, even if that person is you. It has a secretary, it has a paralegal, it has a legal assistant, it has a junior associate, it has a senior associate. You just have to be cognizant of when you're wearing which hat, right? If the phone rings and the person calling does not have an appointment to speak with me, and I answer the phone, I am, notwithstanding the fact that I went to law school, notwithstanding the fact that I'm a member of the bar, notwithstanding the fact that I'm the owner of this fancy business with all these employees and blah, blah, blah. When the phone rings and I answer it and there isn't an appointment to speak to the person calling me, I am doing the job of a receptionist, and in that moment, I am a receptionist, right? If I walk out of here and I get in my car and I put a little Uber sticker in the front and I drive around and I pick people up and I drop people off, I mean, what am I going to do? Say, oh, by the way, that's $10,000 for the ride? Because when I'm doing the job of president of my company, I make thousands of dollars an hour. And so the person's like, screw you. You did the job of an Uber driver. You get paid to be an Uber driver when you're doing the job of an Uber driver, right? When you're doing the job of a receptionist, you're getting paid to do the job of a receptionist. When you're doing the job of a secretary, you're getting paid to do the job of a secretary, junior associate, senior associate, rainmaker, salesperson, and so on and so forth. But if you don't have those jobs clearly defined, it gets really confusing, and then you wonder where all your profits went, and you wonder where your day went, and you wonder where your month went, and you wonder where your life went, and now you're miserable because you look back at it and you're like, damn, I spent half my time doing the job of a receptionist. No wonder I'm not thrilled.
Our next element, physical plant. So right now, we're in the How to Manage offices. You've got a lot of space.
Yeah.
It's really cool. We'll share some walkthroughs and tutorials of various elements of the office in these coming episodes.
Except that other part. Don't show that part.
Yeah.
The secret room.
The secret
room.
Don't
show the secret room.
When it comes to a law firm, talk about the physical plan, because I think that there's an element where some people, maybe they've been in the same office for the last 20 years, but they're not treating it, number one, as a place for their employees. We'll talk about that maybe separately, but the experience. So if the door sticks when they first walk through the door, and there's wallpaper from the 90s, like the experience in the office, one side for the clients, like you mentioned, like the waiting room, but then the other aspect of the physical plant when it comes to how you, the team, operate or interact inside of this environment. So maybe two elements of what the physical plant sort of looks like or feels.
Right. So physical plant, in my mind, the way that we approach it, is all of the stuff that is used by the employees to do their job. That's the physical plant, right? All the stuff that gets used. Now, the physical plant could be the four walls and the door of an office, right? It could be the desks, the chairs, the computers, the technology, and all that. The recipes in a restaurant are also part of the physical plant. The documented processes and systems and procedures, when they're printed out and they're kept in a 3-ring binder, that's part of the physical plant. The intellectual property that the firm creates, which goes onto the balance sheet and becomes equity for the owner for when the day comes or the owner wants to sell the law firm, that's part of the physical plant. Nowadays, post-pandemic, when everyone has employees working from home, you have to take into consideration the space they're working from and the equipment they're using in their home office as part of the physical plan that you, as the owner of the law firm, have to take an interest in, right? Now, from an insurance standpoint, Daniel's head is like, yes, you need to insure that space, right? You have to have insurance for the home office of the employee so you don't end up with a workers' comp claim that's not covered. You need to have insurance for non-owners' auto insurance, so when the employee is driving on company business from their home back and forth, you don't have liability. But I'm not even trying to make the scary argument. I'm saying you have to take an active interest in it if you want to get maximum productivity from your staff, right? So I just hired 3 new people for Team Arjan, just people to work just with me. And they work remotely. One of them works in Texas, one of them works somewhere here in Miami, and one of them works, I don't know, someplace else. I don't know. Not important. But what's important is that when we hired them, we said, okay, show us pictures, show us videos, show us the space you're working from. We need to understand where you're working from, right? And, we gave them a budget to get whatever desks they wanted. We gave them a budget to get whatever chair they wanted. We gave them a budget to get whatever printer they wanted. We gave them a budget to set this thing up to be productive, right? Too often, when an employee is working remote, the owner of the firm thinks that they're somehow absolved from responsibility for the space. Legally, that's not true. From an insurance standpoint, that's not true. From a bar rule standpoint, that's not true. And definitely from a financial profitability standpoint, that's not true. We hired a virtual assistant through a company called Get Staffed Up. She's in Mexico. We shipped her a box with a computer and a VoIP phone and a whole bunch of stuff because we need her to be as productive as possible. And a lot of lawyers, they just completely think virtual assistant, not my problem. Well, if you want to get them to be as profitable for you as they can be, make it your problem.
So that's the virtual element. I want to maybe come back to that in a second. What about the in-person? So when it comes to maybe space experience, we're seeing as things open back up. But
I mean,
I'm talking about the experience.
Think about your favorite restaurant, right? We'll go back to Tarbell's,
sure.
Right? I knew I'd like Tarbell's when I walked in the door, and I like the decor. I like the art on the walls. I like the music they play. I like the vibe of the place, right? That made me, the very first time I went there, I was predisposed to like the food. You know, they tilted the game in their favor by giving me a great experience when I walked in the door, right? Just by the sights, the sounds, the feelings of the whole thing, right? I mean, this is like a silly little thing, right? But I'm only 5'7". So like, one of the things I love about Tarbell's is I fit in the chairs, right? Like so many restaurants, I mean, the food is great, but like my feet are dangling and I feel like a little kid and I feel self-conscious and it's uncomfortable for me. So no matter how great the food is, I don't really ever get comfortable because of that, right? The flatware that they use fits nicely in my hand. The mugs they give us for coffee, you know, they just feel good. I mean, everyone can relate to this in a restaurant, yeah?
Yep.
Where the physical plant of the restaurant gives you a preview of what's to come. And we all have the experience of going to, like, you know, maybe our favorite dive or our favorite diner or something like that. And it's like the wallpaper is peeling and the blinds are like not quite right and the tables are a little crooked. And like, even if they served the world's best filet mignon, lobster, whatever your favorite, most extravagant meal is, it just doesn't match. You're just not going there for that kind of food because the physical plant screams diner. It doesn't scream gourmet experience.
So how do we take that in a law firm and relate to, you know, if the door sticks, if the wallpaper's from the 90s, and that experience? Because I feel like at the same time it's difficult, or not impossible, but a little bit more difficult for someone to command maybe a higher fee or whatever the thing is if they're not looking at some of the other elements of the comprehensive experience.
It goes all the way back to the avatar conversation we had at the beginning, right? Because, you know, McDonald's is a really, really, really profitable business with millions of really, really, really happy customers, right? And when we go to McDonald's, we don't go to McDonald's expecting to see, you know, china, fine china,
white tablecloths,
and white tablecloths and a candle and expect someone to come up and take our order. We go to McDonald's with a completely different experience. When I'm going into McDonald's, I'm going into McDonald's with a completely different avatar of myself than when I go into Tarbell's, for example, right? Everything that McDonald's does makes sense for McDonald's. Nothing that McDonald's does would make sense for Tarbell's. Everything that Tarbell's does would make great sense for Tarbell's. Nothing that Tarbell's does would make any sense at McDonald's. And yet they're both successful restaurants. So, you know, the name of the game isn't always commanding premium fees. You know, there's a lot of law firms that are wildly successful with really happy owners, really happy staff, and really happy clients who are doing a high volume, low price, low cost, a McDonald's version of a law firm. They do great work. People love them.
So let's move to the next element, number 6, financial controls. This is another one of the elements, like sales, that tend to be dramatically overlooked in a practice.
Run away from, hidden from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I run the practice based off of the dollar amount that's in the checking account or in the operating account.
It's very, very disappointing how much money supposedly smart people leave on the table because they are afraid. They just lack the courage to say, I'm going to learn this. It's very learnable. Financial controls are not complicated. I can teach any reasonably intelligent 12 or 13-year-old. We have a kids entrepreneur club. And a couple years ago, we did one of the kids entrepreneur clubs. And we, you know, what do you want to learn? And the kids wanted to learn financials. Don't know why, but they did. So we took a group of 12-year-olds to 18-year-olds, and we taught them how to read a set of financials. They know how to read a P&L. They know how to read a balance sheet. They know how to read a cash flow projection. They know what cost of goods sold are. They know the difference between gross profits and gross margin, gross revenues and gross profits. They know how to calculate margins. I mean, we sent home a little squad of monsters to go home to their parents. I mean, it was kind of funny. We're like, and as homework, go ask your parents to look at their financials. And these little 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds were like, Mom, Dad, I want to see your financials. And like the kids were like making sense of the financials. And the parents were like, what does this mean? It's not complicated, right? It's look, my undergraduate degree is communications law, economics, and government.
Okay.
And don't for one second think economics means you know anything about business or finance, right? Then I went to law school where, they didn't teach me anything about financial controls. And then I opened my own law firm and I fell on my face because I, in part, didn't know about any of the stuff we're talking about here, including but not limited to financials. And then I ended up getting, long story short, I ended up at the Florida Bar Law Office Management Assistance Service. And I learned that one of my superpowers was taking complicated things that overwhelm and scare and intimidate other people and explaining it and teaching it in terms that like anyone can understand. And I'm telling you, I promise you, I can teach any reasonably intelligent 12 or 13-year-old how to really, truly be empowered by a set of financials.
And I think that's also just putting it in perspective. You don't have to understand GAAP, like all of the generally accepted accounting principles. It's understanding some of the high-level elements of how they fit into a P&L or an income statement or a balance sheet.
It's even more simple than that. GAAP was not meant for small law firms. Take GAAP and throw it in the garbage. GAAP has nothing to do with small law firms. GAAP was invented in the 1930s to protect the investing public against fraudsters. General accepted accounting principles, first of all, they're not necessarily the best accounting principles. They're definitely not the only accounting principles. GAAP is the result of a giant negotiation between the entire GAAP committee from the 1930s and 1940s. And just for fun, hardly a year has gone by since that GAAP hasn't been adjusted, updated, and changed because it's constantly, so the point I'm making is GAAP is not gospel.
No.
It's gospel for accountants, but for small business entrepreneurs, you don't need to know anything about GAAP.
That's what I'm getting at. You don't need to understand all of the minutia of it, but understanding, it's not complex to understand the high level of a P&L. And you made the point with, teaching 12, 13, 15-year-olds how to do it.
Right.
Is there an element, because, you can who not how this, have a bookkeeper. Is there a tactical option of at least maybe having some help or support in getting some of those things, initially created so you're not sitting there where there's more month than money and having to do some of these things yourself and being able to at least understand it and not be nitty-gritty? Is there an element tactically that you would recommend for a small law firm?
So this is just overall general business advice for everyone.
Yeah.
Don't waste your time trying to become mediocre at things that you suck at. Focus on becoming spectacular at things you're great at, and then hire other people who are great at the things that you suck at, right? So I'm surrounded by people who are better than me in every part of my business, right? The CEO of my business is 1,000,000 times better of a CEO than I'm ever going to be. The CFO of how to manage, last year we grossed almost $30 million. I'm not going to be a CFO of a $30 million business. I don't want to be the CFO of a $30 million business. I don't have the right stuff. That's just not who I am, right? The person who who really builds the team and manages everywhere around me. I've got a CEO who's 1,000,000 times better than me as a CEO. I've got a CFO who's 1,000,000 times better than I'll ever be as a CFO. I have a COO. I have a CTO. I've got all these people who are even my executive assistant. I mean, I'm a disorganized wreck. You were in my office. You see what it looks like when I leave my office, and you see what it looks like when she goes back in there and puts it all back together for me, right? I can't find anything. I surround myself by people who are better than me, and I just allow myself to be the best in the world at the thing that I am, I believe, the best in the world at.
So let's round the conversation out with goals.
That's kind of a good segue.
Yeah, it is. It's goals obviously are important to have direction, purpose. It creates the roadmap, or it can help to create the roadmap of where you want to go with the purpose of the practice, the business, the income, the team, etc. Where would you start when it comes to goals for a small law firm?
I would start by getting clear on what your standards are. Goals are what we aspire to. Standards actually describe how you end up living on a day-to-day basis, right? Goals are like a compass. They point you, are you pointing in the right direction? The standards, that's how you're living. I could have a goal of having $1 million of income. But if my standard is that I tolerate underperforming marketing vendors, if my standard is that I tolerate not having insight into the financials of my business, if my standards are that I tolerate staff who are doing whatever they feel like doing, however they feel like doing it with no accountability, well, that's going to give you a pretty good idea of how I'm really living in reality, notwithstanding my highfalutin, inspiring goals.
Yep. The psychologist would say the standards are basically you fall to the level of your standards. So if you raise your floor, you raise your standards, then you fall to that level right there.
Which is really scary for most people to do, because once you raise your standards, there's a level of accountability. And like, well, what if? Well, what if? You tell me. You know, it's really interesting, and I use cars as an analogy here all the time, right? So think about, I was in your car when we were in Phoenix. No, that was a rental car.
Rental, yeah.
Okay, so what kind of car do you drive?
A Tesla.
You drive a Tesla. I have a Tesla too. What kind?
X.
I have an X. All right,
Black on black.
White on black on white. Anyway, the point I'm making is we both drive. Okay, so that car is, do you lease it?
I own it. Yeah.
Okay, I leased mine and then I bought it out at the end of the lease. The point I'm making is it was like $1,300 or $1,400 a month when I was leasing it. All right?
Yep.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, you know, what if I can't make the monthly payment is what a lot of people think, right? But those same people are driving a car that has, let's say, a $500 monthly payment. And they're like, well, yeah, $500 is reasonable. $1,300 is scary. But you know what? For everyone who's driving a car that costs $500 a month to drive, there's someone driving a car that costs $200 a month to drive, and they're looking at the prospects of making a $500 a month commitment, saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, $500, what if I can't make the payment? And for everyone who's driving a car that's $200 a month, there's someone who is driving some old jalopy, and they're like, I am afraid to make a commitment for $200 a month. And for everyone else who's driving the old jalopy, there's someone else who's riding the bus, right? What are your standards going to be, right? You live down to your standards. But you know, once you make the decision that your minimum standard is going to be X, well, that creates the obligation to raise everything else in your life up to that standard, and that starts to get uncomfortable because, you know, other people in your life have to either rise up to that standard with you or get left behind.
I think that's a hard element for a lot of people because, well, this person helped me get there, or this person was along for the way, or their family. There's a lot of elements.
Well, that person's married to me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's hard.
It's very hard.
Personal development. Listen, how to manage a small law firm for all of the glory and fame that we get. We get glory and fame, right?
We'll go with it.
For all the glory and fame we get. No, but for really, for all of the recognition that we get, and I appreciate the recognition, for growing law firms, we are at heart a personal development business. We do personal development for entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs we focus on happen to own law firms, you know, and if you don't work on the mindset, if you don't work on the way a person thinks, if you don't work on how a person thinks, and you only focus on what they think about, the improvements don't stick, right? I'm not just interested in growing a firm from $250,000 to $1 million in 18 or 24 months once, and then look back at them a year, 2 years, 3 years later, and they're still there or they backslid. I want to see that the improvements that we help to put into place keep going and keep growing and keep making the world a better place.
When it comes to implementing all of these, is there an element that you would say maybe don't get overwhelmed with it? You take the way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. Is there a way when it comes to getting this these implemented into a practice that you would say to a small attorney or a small law firm, like, you got this? Like, what would be the advice that you would leave them with as we close this out?
I can share a workbook with you. I can share some resources with you for how they can put together a business plan. And I would just say, don't judge your beginning by someone else's middle. Start where you're at and just understand that the third version of your business plan is going to make your first version of your business plan look pretty primitive. If the 10th version of your business plan doesn't make you feel a little bit embarrassed by the first version, then you probably waited too long to get the first version out into the world and into operation.
So what we'll do then is we will include that for everyone who's watching and attending. Arjan, it's been an awesome experience and enjoyed it as usual. And we'll see all of you again next month.
Thank you for coming to Miami to do this here in my office so I don't have to go anywhere.
It's our pleasure.
Thanks.